Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ted Gardner, and I am an interviewer for the Library of Congress Oral History Project, so capably and wonderfully managed here at our Public Library of Cincinnati. Dennis Daly is our historian and also our videographer. And we're going to be talking to Hurley Chancey today. I've never met a man who had a name like that quite. And Hurley served 30 years in the Marine Corps. And Hurley, we're just delighted to have you here today and glad to get acquainted and get a chance to talk with you. And you're going to get a DVD of this interview for you and your family. We send a copy to the Library of Congress in Washington archives and keep a copy here in the main library archives. So your history, and people can check up on you anytime they want in a few weeks after they get things done here. Where were you born, Hurley?
In Memphis, Tennessee.
Memphis, Tennessee. Oh my God, were you born on Beale Street by any chance?
No, a long way from Beale Street. Back in the days when, anyway, it was 1928.
1928.
Born on a street called Atlantic Street.
Atlantic Street in the middle of the country.
Yeah, my father was working for the Singer Sewing Machine Company. And
oh, really?
back in the 20s, Singer had a little sewing machine sales office, plus they would sell machines and teach people how to use them
sure.
and so forth. And they had one in every county seat just about.
Oh, yeah.
And my father worked for them, and they kept sending him to a new store that they would open. And so he would be a store manager for a while. And
sure.
They drug me around to different parts of Tennessee and Mississippi and
well, that's great.
Chattanooga and Corinth. And
how about that?
And I went to school in a lot of different places.
Well, first of all, I wanted to ask you, how about your family? Did you have brothers and sisters?
I had two sisters. One was 12 years older than me, and one was 6 years older than me.
Okay, so you were tail end Charlie, huh?
I was the baby, and the only son in that family.
Wow.
So they didn't let me go to bed hungry, but
I'll bet.
In the 1930s, a lot of people went to bed hungry.
Oh, that's for sure. I remember that terrible Depression time. So what was your first elementary school? Where did you start school?
In Jackson, Tennessee.
Jackson.
Yeah.
Now, that's where?
It's east of Memphis, about 2 hours.
About 2 hours east of Memphis, okay. As you said, your father was moved around a lot and you had school in different places. Interrupting school, was that an important thing for you? Did it affect your life forever or anything like that?
Well, if anything, it probably helped me because I had to make new friends every
It was a challenge, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Sure, even for a youngster.
I enjoyed it, really.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't mind moving.
That's right. That's good. Well, I can tell right away from your personality that you would have no problem at all. So then, eventually, of course, you went to high school. Where did you go to high school?
Well, by then, we were back in Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay.
Yeah, in the meantime, I'd lived in Corinth and Fort Walton Beach, Florida.
Oh, my.
2 summers. Boy, did I enjoy that.
Oh, boy, I'll say.
I was about 15 years old at the time, and I had my first date with Audrey. I'll never forget Audrey.
Oh, that's great. Well, now that's down near Eglin Air Force Base, isn't it?
That's where my father was working at that time.
Oh, he was?
Yeah, by that time he had left, nobody was buying sewing machines in the 1930s.
Right.
And so he had found other employment, and he went to night school and learned the machinist trade, and he went to work for the government in Memphis at a Army depot in the machine shop.
Oh.
He was a machinist.
Yes.
Expert machinist.
Sure.
And along in World War II, started in 1941, as you may recall.
Yeah.
He was working in Memphis at the Army depot at that time.
Okay.
And they said, we really need you down in Eglin, Florida. So if you'll accept the transfer, we want you to go to Eglin Field and work in that machine shop there.
How about that?
And so he agreed and moved
sure.
all of us down to Fort Walton Beach. And
well, I'll bet that were you exposed to the Air Corps, Air Force there at that time?
Yeah,
As a kid?
And not directly, and they didn't allow me to go on the base.
Oh, I see.
But there was an interesting thing that I saw there. I saw some B-25s, and I know they were behaving very erratically. I mean, they were doing crazy things. It was flying around between oak trees, and one of them was flying down Santa Rosa Sound. Looked like he was going to go underneath that US 98 bridge. And I thought for sure he was going to do it, but at the last minute he pulled up. But they did crazy things, and one of them crashed on the beach, and my buddy and I didn't get over there to time to pick up people pieces, but we picked up pieces of the airplane.
I'll be darned.
Later on, I found out why they were acting so crazy. Those guys had signed up for
Suicide mission.
a mission to bomb Tokyo, and they thought they were not coming back. They thought it was going away.
Well, that is very interesting because here in Cincinnati, there's a man by the name of Tom Griffin. Have you ever heard of him?
Heard of him, yeah.
Yeah, he was navigator on plane number 9 off the Hornet on the 18th of April, 1942. And he trained there. He was part of that group that you saw.
That's right.
Because I know him very well, and I've heard him give his story. Well, that's something else to talk about. Okay, so did you finish school at Jackson High School?
No, my mother and father were really not happy with that Fort Walton Beach, Florida. It was great for me, being 15 years old, and all that water and good fishing and good beach and everything. And so I liked it very much, but they didn't, and they wanted to get back to Memphis. And my dad requested a transfer to go back to Memphis, and they said, well, we can't do that. And my dad said, well, sorry, goodbye. And
Yeah.
so he left and took us back to Memphis and went back to the Army depot out there where he'd worked before, and they said, yeah, we want you back. So
Good. Now, was that after Pearl Harbor, or was that before?
yeah, that was after Pearl Harbor.
Where were you? You, of course, will remember Pearl Harbor Day. Everybody does.
Yeah.
Where were you? What were you doing on that day when you got the word?
I was at Memphis, Tennessee, and I had been out on my bicycle. I was in 41 and I was born in 28, so.
13 years old.
Yeah, and I got off my bike, came in the house, and my mother and dad were looking really sad, and I said, well, what's wrong? I thought, somebody had been killed or something. Right?
Sure.
And they started telling me about it, and
Yeah.
I couldn't really, being at that age,
I know, couldn't grasp it all, right. But that truly, that's a date that anybody who has a memory of that date never forgets it. So you were 13 on December the 7th. So you had another 5 years to go in high school, didn't you?
Yeah, I completed my high school at Memphis Technical High School and graduated in spring of 46.
46.
Yeah. Interesting. I played on the golf team when I was in high school and really enjoyed that. And I was in ROTC also. Wasn't an officer, but I learned a little bit about.
Well, sure.
There
Got some good training, you bet.
Right.
Well,
when I completed my high school education, got my degree, some of my classmates said, Hurley, why don't you go with us? We're going to join the Marine Corps. And I said, well, let me think about that. And I thought about it a little bit, and I came back to him real quick and said, well, that's very interesting, but I'm really going to try to get into college this fall. And I wasn't aware that my parents were going to be completely unable financially to take care of that, and I certainly couldn't. And my B+ average didn't tempt anybody to help me with the cost of going to college. So by late in the summer, it was pretty obvious that I was not going to go to college. And so I said, well, I believe I'll check out this B5 program. It's a military program where there's college training involved, and and you get to be trained to be an officer and fly airplanes. I said,
Sure.
well, I can't go wrong there, so I'll just see if I can get into that program. Well, when I decided to try to get into it, I went to the recruiting office and found out that, well, actually that program is closed.
Yep.
We think it's going to reopen shortly, but right now it's closed. And I was told that the officer in charge of that program was in New Orleans. And so I said, well, by golly, I'll just go talk to him. That's what they recommended. And so I got on the train and went down to New Orleans, and I talked to the officer in charge of the V5 program. And he said, yeah, it's closed. I'm pretty darn sure that it's going to reopen, but I don't really know exactly when. I would think within a couple, 3 months. He says, but when it reopens, we're going to be offering first choice to people that are in the military. And he says, you're a young man, you ought to think about joining up now, and then when it opens up, you can sign up. And he says, besides, the GI Bill is going to expire here in just a couple of months. And he says, my advice to you is enlist. And then when you
Be eligible for the GI Bill.
right, when the V5 program opens up, you can sign up, and you're going to be eligible for the GI Bill in case the program doesn't open up or you don't get in.
How about that?
And so I said, well, that sounds like good advice. I believe I'll invest. And he said, oh, by the way, he says the Marine Corps does have an option on aviation contract. You can sign up at the Marine Corps for either 2 years or 3 years. If you go for the 3-year hitch, you can request assignment to a squadron, and at least you won't be flying there, but you'll be working with people that do, or for people that do. And so I said, well, okay, 3 years, 2 years, 3 years sounds good. So I signed up for a 3-year hitch. What they called us when we got to Paris Island was Airedales. And they didn't take kindly to Airedales back in Paris Island boot camp, but I learned a lot of things in boot camp.
I'll bet.
And one of which was that regular Marines looked down on Airedales. But and I also learned that after I was there for a few weeks, that there are other things about the military that I'm not sure I wanted to sign up for. So if you enlisted in the V5 program, you were signing for a contract, at least 7 years, probably more. And so I decided, I don't think I'll sign up for the V5 program. So
How long were you there at Paris Island?
Paris Island is about a 2 months. They took us to the firing range, and that was an interesting experience. I was already a good shot. I hadn't owned it. My father let me use his .22 rifle, and I probably shot it, 10,000 rounds or more. So I was a pretty good shot when I got there. And we went to the rifle range, and all of the trainers at the range had a competition between themselves. Each one of these Marines was training 3 positions on the firing range and maybe 3 platoons. So he had like 9 guys that he was trying to get to be an expert rifleman. And since I had already had a lot of experience hitting the target, he right away saw that he had an opportunity to perhaps make me into an expert rifleman and maybe win his bet with the other trainers. And so he did. He gave me a little extra, and I did make expert. And
good.
At that time, you get an extra $5 a month
Betcha.
for having a little medal that says you're an expert.
Big deal.
Yeah.
Big deal. Yeah. Well, that's very interesting. So, what was your next assignment then?
Well, after I finished my basic training, we went to Cherry Point, North Carolina, and I served right away about 9 weeks of mess duty. Mess duty means you get up at 2 a.m. and make sure the guys have some breakfast, and you get a little break in between breakfast and lunch, another little break in between lunch and dinner, and then you're cleaning up after dinner, and so you don't get to bed till 10:30 or so.
It was
Wasn't great duty.
Not happy duty at all. I should say not.
Gained a lot of weight.
And
There was always a lot of food around.
you peeled a lot of spuds and. And then finally, something must have happened that got you going somewhere else, huh?
Oh yeah. After a few weeks there in Cherry Point, they decided that I needed a little more training on how to repair airplanes. So they transferred me to Quantico, Virginia, to a place called MCATS, Marine Corps Aviation Training School. And I started out on a training course there that was going to be, I've forgotten now exactly how long it was, maybe 3 months, something like that. And about a third of the way into that, I was playing on their baseball team and fell and broke my left wrist.
Hmm.
And they put a cast on my wrist and gave me a different duty, took me out of my class, and which kind of bothered me. I wanted to get my education in that class finished, and they took me out of the class and said I was going to have to start over again for the next class, which I did. Started over with the next class, completed that course, and became a mechanic for the F-4U-4 aircraft. Not the training at that point was not to rebuild engine. It was basic type stuff, you know, change spark plugs and do checks and fix brakes, replace tires, wheels, brakes, that sort of thing. But then I was transferred after I got my training back to Cherry Point, North Carolina, and assigned to VMF 222. That's Marine Fighter Squadron 222. And we had F-4U-4 Corsairs, the inverted gull-wing fighter, really a great
Beautiful
airplane.
plane. Oh boy. Incredible plane, yes. Yeah, that was the kind of plane that Pappy Boynton flew. And blah, 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 Black Sheep and all that sort of thing. Cactus Air Force and all that, yeah. Well, now, working on those planes, now this is at the end of the war or right after the war was over?
Yeah, see, I went to Paris Island in 1946.
Okay, all right.
And, fall of 46. And the war was over several months before that.
Oh, yes, yeah.
I've forgotten the exact date now.
Right.
Quite a long time before that.
Right.
Yeah, I was extremely lucky in that, as it turned out, I turned 18 years of age after the World War II was over. Matter of fact, during the whole 3 years that I was in the Marine Corps, there were very few Marines getting shot at. A few over in China, but I never got over there. Those people that were fighting over there at that time, it wasn't even called an army, it was called bandits.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They were kind of getting started up.
Yeah, the Chi-Coms, you know, the communist China's. Well, did you get transferred from Cherry Point to somewhere?
We went to several places. I never had a permanent transfer after that. The Squadron VMF 222 was stationed at Cherry Point.
Right.
And we went on maneuvers. Well, for example, we took 2 cruises on the USS Saipan, and those were interesting experiences too. And we
Tell us about that.
Oh, okay. Well, let me take it in sequential order. I think the first maneuver we went on was to Barron Field, Alabama, not too far from Mobile, pretty close to Foley, Alabama. And we were flying training missions out of that field, and we had targets. There were other operational units involved in the maneuvers. I don't have the details on that, but at Barron Field, where we were flying from, it was, well, we had reasonable accommodations, and the food was still reasonably good, but it was not, it wasn't like Quantico or Cherry Point, but we were only there for several weeks. And one interesting thing happened there. planes went up for a night operation, and when they came back, one of our planes caught on fire, not in the fuselage, but in one wheel. And the wheel was on fire, and the plane didn't have any real problem. It landed, even though the wheel was on fire. They put the fire out, and the sergeant in charge of repairs sent me out there to fix it. And when I took it apart, I discovered mine caught on fire. Whoever had put the wheel on last time had failed to put the inner rotor bearings in place. It had
Oh my
rotor
God.
bearings on the inner side of the wheel.
No wonder it was on fire.
Yeah. I went back to the sergeant. I said, I don't know who put that last wheel on, but he needs a little more training because
Wow.
we had no bearings whatsoever on that.
How about
inside of
that?
the wheel. Anyway, I got him all fixed up, and he flew away again. And that was, I guess, the first maneuvers we went on. The second one, I believe, was on the Saipan, right. We loaded up our gear into transport planes at Cherry Point, and we got our sea bags lashed into the center of the transport plane, and we were, those of us that were working on the planes were seated alongside the fuselage with our back to the fuselage, and we were playing cards using our sea bags for a table. And eventually we got over to Norfolk. The flight was from Cherry Point, North Carolina to Norfolk, Virginia. And our planes had already flown over and had landed at the field at Norfolk. And the planes were towed by a tractor down to the dock and hoisted up onto the flight deck of the USS Saipan, which was a carrier we were going out on. And they got us over there somehow or other, and we loaded our gear into the Saipan and took off. And this was a training mission for VMF 222. And we left Norfolk and headed south down the Atlantic, and it was kind of nice to be heading down into the Caribbean in February, which is what we were doing. Had really nice weather. And the main thing that we were doing was requalifying the pilots on the carrier landing. You know, landing a plane on a carrier has always been a difficult thing, and a lot of these pilots, I don't know what percentage, but a large percentage of the pilots in our squadron had only landed a few dozen times in their training at Pensacola a year or two before. So you could say that they were green about landing planes on an aircraft carrier. But they managed to bring them all down, and we didn't kill anybody. A few of them landed upside down, and some of them broke off a wing on the island and other things. One chopped off his landing tail hook on the fantail of the flight deck. So he didn't stop till he hit the barriers.
Oh, wow.
But matter of fact, one of those kind of scared me rather badly. My job when planes were landing was to be on the flight deck, and as soon as the plane was landed safely on the flight deck and the barriers were dropped down, the plane would taxi forward and would be spotted from the forward end of the flight deck. Well, after it was spotted, my job was to inspect a portion of the landing gear.
Oh, yeah.
There was a landing gear was cast aluminum, and there was one particular weak spot that we had some that had broken there. And so my job was to get my head up in the wheel well along with a flashlight and inspect this particular spot on each one of the two landing struts. And while I would have had my head up in one evening, or one day rather, this was a day job, not a night, I heard something or other that didn't sound right, and I pulled my head out and looked back, and here comes one of those F4U4s charging at me, and I thought sure he was going to get me.
Oh, my God.
But he had a problem. He was way up, his hook, he hadn't got a wire, his hook had missed the wire somehow or other.
Wow.
And he flew into the barriers, and there's 3 sets of barrier cables, and I didn't see this because I was running for the catwalk at the flight deck, but they were telling me what happened. He hit the deck really hard, and it started his wheels to rolling, and then he got froze with his stick back, and the plane was flying down the flight deck well up in the air, so that his turning wheels hit the top cable on the barrier and rolled it right off, and then on the second one, the cable hit the strut and flipped him over upside down. So he landed upside down on the deck, and he didn't get hurt, although he wound up in a position with his head only about that far from the flight deck.
Just imagine.
Yeah.
Wow. Those were very, very difficult things, and I remember too. I had some carrier duty and at sea, and those pilots really had a tough time, particularly on a pitching, rolling ship at sea. But your work on those planes was just remarkable what you accomplished, and you were a very accomplished machinist. That's great. That was.
Yeah, I felt good about the work that I did for the planes, and I got promoted. Over the 3 years, I got 3 stripes. They offered me a 4th stripe if I re-enlist, but I said, no, I think I'm going to try civilian life.
So you got out as first class, huh?
Yeah, I was a 3-striper when I got out.
3-striper,
yeah.
Sergeant. Yeah, yeah. Well, did you work on any other type planes besides the F4U?
No, the F4U was the only plane that my squadron flew while I was with that squadron. They did get some jets just a month or so before I finished my 3-year hitch, but I never worked on those.
I see.
I did work on I had one interesting job on one of the planes that I worked on. It needed a new electric fuel pump. Now, the fuel pump in the F4U-4 Corsair is, as you might suspect, is right down the bottom of the fuel tank. Well, the fuel tank on an F4U-4 is pretty sizable. It's big enough to get into. I was into it. I had my shoes off, and I hadn't bothered to get rid of every bit of that 100-octane gasoline. Maybe a half a gallon, I guess, down in there. And I'm down in there. I took the manhead off. There was about, 60 bolts holding the manhead off. I got down in the gasoline tank, and like I said, I had my shoes off. My socks were in that 100-octane gasoline, and I was breathing the fumes, not realizing that I was getting a little rough. But I was getting the bolts out, taking this electric fuel pump out of the bottom of the tank, and all of a sudden I realized that I was not feeling 100% right.
Yeah.
Thank goodness this tank is big enough for me to get into, but I was able to stand up, and when I stood up, this part of me was outside the tank.
Oh my God.
So I was getting some good air to counteract those fumes that I'd been breathing, and so I didn't have any lasting action.
Oh, that was lucky. Yeah. Boy, you've had some close calls.
Thank goodness I wasn't getting shot at.
Oh well. You were doing a very, very important service, and that was great. The F4U. Tell your family about what that plane was like, what it was capable of doing, speed and so forth.
I don't remember the exact numbers, but the speed-wise, it could fly well over 300 miles an hour, and it had 6 50 caliber machine guns.
Wow.
And had bomb carrying capacity of, I'm not sure, I think it was a little over 1,000 pounds of bombs.
Did it carry any wing rockets too?
We didn't have rockets. Yeah, actually we did have some rockets, but the main weapon at that time was the machine gun. We didn't have any rockets that were heat-seeking or the kind of things that we have nowadays.
Yeah. But that was a formidable piece of fighting material.
Oh yeah, it could carry a 500-pound bomb under each wing, plus a full complement of 50 caliber shells for the 6 machine guns, and it was capable of doing a good job for ground support.
Wow.
And
well, one of the great things about that plane, of course, also was its armor. I mean, that was a heavy plane. She had a lot of serious protection on it.
Yeah, it would take a lot of abuse and still come home.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, the F4U Corsair, and of course that style of plane was built by several other manufacturers as well. there were, I mean, Goodyear, I think, built the F4U, and they called it something else, but it was the same kind of a plane.
Yeah, there were 2 or 3 of them that built that plane
Yeah.
for the Navy. And the
Right,
Marine Corps.
right. So, what are we doing here? We're winding down your service, when?
I completed my 3-year hitch in September of 1949, and started college several months after that. Got my bachelor's degree in business administration in '54
From where?
from Memphis State University.
Oh,
And
the Tigers.
yeah, the Tigers.
Did you stay in the reserves?
No, when they asked me to re-enlist, and they said, we'll give you another strike, make you a staff sergeant if you re-enlist, and I said, no, I think I'll try civilian life. And they said, well, surely you want to join the reserves? And I said, no, I think maybe I want to be sure that
You don't
I'm
get,
able to try.
don't get called
civilian
back.
life.
Right,
So didn't have an inkling that Korea was going to pop up.
right.
That interesting point there, though, is some of my classmates, the ones that had decided to enlist in the Marine Corps in June of '46, so the year that we graduated from high school, they, all 3 of them, took convenience of the government discharges prior to serving 12 months.
Oh,
Then they were invited to go to Korea,
yeah.
and so they did. But I was kind of glad I missed that show.
Yeah, I missed that one too, thank goodness. And that was a terrible, dirty war, really bad. And I had a couple of squadron mates that were killed in Korea. They were called back. But I'm just fascinated by your duty and what you were able to perform. And the interesting thing is that you had that mechanical ability. That was, you were born with that, weren't you?
Yeah, I definitely had a tendency to do things mechanical. I mean, when I was 10, 12 years old, I was always disassembling my bicycle and rebuilding and things like that.
Sure.
And later on in high school, like I said, my father was a machinist. He was also a sewing machine mechanic, and he taught me how to do that. And I worked with him on
Wow.
sewing machines, mostly commercial, industrial type machines.
Well, that was great training for you, my goodness sakes.
Yeah.
I should say so. Okay, so you got out of the Marines, you went to Memphis State. Now, were you able to take advantage of the GI Bill at that time?
That's right. I was the first person in my family to get a college degree, and I would not have been able to do that without the GI Bill.
Yeah.
The GI Bill bought my books, paid my tuition.
Sure.
Without that help, I don't think I would ever have gotten a college degree.
Absolutely. What was your degree in now?
Business administration.
Business administration.
Yeah, small business management was my major.
Oh yeah, SBA. Oh my golly. Well, did you go into business right away after graduation?
Well, not into small business. A friend of mine said he had a friend that was working for Procter & Gamble, and they were looking for some people to do some industrial engineering work for them. He said, you ought to go talk to him. I said, okay, I'll talk to him. Well, I liked what they said, and so I went to work for Procter & Gamble.
I'll be darned.
And I worked for them for a long time, 32 years to be exact.
No kidding. Oh gosh, that's great.
Yeah.
So you got your Procter & Gamble stock and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I did all right. When I retired, I didn't have $1 million like some of those folks do, but I was able to invest what I did have, and I was able to have a very nice retirement.
I should say, that's wonderful. When did you get married?
Got married in 1950, and when I started school in 1950, I was single, and when I got my degree in 1954, I already had 3 children.
Oh boy. You didn't waste any time.
Didn't waste any
Boy, I'll say not. Did you marry a hometown girl?
Oh yeah,
Memphis girl.
right, a Memphis girl, right.
Now, when you went to Procter & Gamble, did they have a facility in Memphis?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, they did.
That's where you worked.
Well, did my training there, and then my first assignment was at a unit that the company I was working for was the Buckeye Cotton Oil Company, which was a wholly owned subsidiary of Procter & Gamble.
I see.
And they had a cottonseed crushing operation in Memphis, and they had a cellulose operation in Memphis, and they had an operation in Wilson, Arkansas, which is where I was after I finished my training in Memphis in the industrial engineering section. They sent me to this facility in Wilson, Arkansas. And that consisted of a cottonseed, or was it soybean? No, it was soybean extraction mill and a edible plant that turned the soybean oil into shortening and margarine, that type of thing. And I worked in that section.
How about that?
Industrial engineering work.
Crisco, huh?
Right, Crisco type, although that wasn't one of our brands.
No, that wasn't one of your brands, but...
That was a P&G brand at Ivordale.
Oh, it was,
later.
yeah.
But at this place in Arkansas, they didn't make the small containers, they only made the bulk size, 100.
Industrial,
100 industrial type. But tank trucks.
Wow.
A whole tank truck of margarine oil.
Oh my gosh, just imagine. Wow. So, how long were you at Wilson, Arkansas?
It was about 2 years. Buckeye Cotton Oil had the place leased, and the lease expired in 2 years. And in the last year or so that I was there, I worked on the study to see if it was economically feasible to renew the lease. We had an option to renew the lease, but the numbers didn't look good at all. I mean, our costs were not, compared to others, were not really great, and so it was, the lease was not renewed.
Right, I understand.
Yeah, but P&G just let it go back to the owners.
So then what happened?
Well, then those of us that were on the monthly payroll kind of got scattered. Some were transferred to Chicago, some to the cellulose plant in Foley, Florida, and I was transferred to Louisville, Kentucky. Louisville, Kentucky, there was a soybean oil extraction process, and I did industrial engineering work there for 2 years. And then that was sold. That was sold to Ralston Purina after I'd been there a couple of years, and I was transferred to Cincinnati, Ivordale.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, when I came to Ivordale, I said, well, they sold the last 2 places where I worked, so I guess they'll be selling Ivordale next year. But somebody said, you must be crazy, they'll never sell Ivordale.
Never sell
Ivordale. They were wrong, they did sell Ivordale.
Yeah, they did eventually, didn't they? Yeah, after many years, though.
Right.
Yeah,
Years.
yeah.
Yeah, I worked at Ivordale most of my, the 2 years in Arkansas and the 2 years in Louisville, Kentucky, and then the rest of my 32 years, I had 1 year in Los Angeles. I was a contract manufacturing rep for P&G at a contract manufacturer in Los Angeles for a year, and a half a year at another contract manufacturing place in Illinois. But the rest of the time I was at Ivordale. The assignment in California was really nice because at that particular time, my children were all grown and away from home, and so my wife was able to go with me, and we lived in a rented apartment there in Los Angeles, and neither one of us had ever been to California before, so
Right.
And I didn't have to work very many weekends, so most every weekend we were tourists, seeing things that we had never seen before.
Good for you. So did you get up into the mountains?
Oh yeah, took a week's vacation and went to Yosemite and what's the big, I was talking about the tree,
Oh, the redwoods,
yeah, the redwood, the giant redwood.
giant redwoods.
Yeah, two kinds of redwoods.
Yeah, the ones up in the mountains.
Yeah.
The sequoias.
They never did really figure out how to make good lumber out of that.
No, that was a different,
That coastal redwood was something else.
yeah, that was remarkable.
Yeah, one of the best places I went to in California was called Muir's Woods.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if you've been there.
Yes, I
Yosemite
have.
is spectacular, but I like Muir's Woods.
Sure, yeah. Yes, that part of the lumber industry was remarkable because those trees, redwood trees, grew fast, and of course they had the great strength.
Yes, and the bugs didn't eat them up like that.
That's right.
They were immune to the
Yeah.
infestation.
So did you get over most of California? Did you get up in the northern part of the state and everything?
Not at that point in time. After I retired, my wife and I did quite a bit of traveling.
Well, good for you.
We had friends in Seattle. We visited them 2 or 3 times, and my granddaughter that finished her college in Cincinnati was moving to Sacramento, and I told her that if she would rent a one-way trailer, I would and load it up. I would drag it out to Sacramento for her. So my wife and I did that. Took my granddaughter's house apartment furniture out to Sacramento, and then we went on and toured California and Oregon and Washington after we dropped off her furniture in Sacramento.
Oh, I'll bet she appreciated her grandparents' help on that.
Yes, she did.
Is she still out there?
No, she went out there after chasing her boyfriend. They got married, and they have 2 of the most beautiful great-grandchildren I've ever seen in my life.
Isn't that
They
one?
live back here in Cincinnati now.
Oh, that's nice. You got them here.
I get to see them right.
Oh, good for you. Well, that's one of the great payoffs to be a grandparent.
Sure is.
To have your grandchildren nearby, I should say. Have you done any foreign travel?
No, I really have not.
Made it all
Well,
the-
I haven't done I guess you might call it foreign. My wife and I bought a small mobile home in Florida, and we spent 17 winters, I guess, in that. We don't own it now, but we were wintering in that for at least 17 years.
Wow.
It was near Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we did is we signed up to take a cruise through the Panama Canal.
Oh,
We
boy.
got aboard the Holland America ship in Tampa and stopped off in the Caribbean islands, British West Indies, for one day, and then on down and we stopped into foreign port in where was that? Bolivia.
Oh, yeah.
I
And
can't
then,
remember the exact.
then Panama, of course.
Yeah, yeah. And then we went through the Panama Canal.
Wow.
And had shore excursions in Costa Rica and Mexico, the western
Nice.
shore of Mexico, Puerto Vallarta, and some others. And then we wound up in San Diego and flew back from San Diego.
What a nice trip.
Yeah, it was really a nice trip.
Oh, boy, I'll say.
Enjoyed that very much.
You got plans to do some more traveling?
Well, my wife's health is not really good enough to do very much.
Oh.
We're hoping that it'll get better, but we're both 80 years old now, and so I don't look too good about it.
Well, you've got a nice setup there in Green Hills, and I'm sure you're very comfortable there, aren't you?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Yeah.
We've still got 5 of us that get together most every Thursday morning, and they're all, one of the reasons we call it an investment club is because it was B&G retirees, and as you know, B&G's retirement system is not a defined benefit. You gotta take care of whatever you get in retirement and invest it as wisely as you can, with help or without, and so we call it an investment club. We didn't put money in the pot, but we talked about, well, how would you, what kind of investment do you like? Mutual funds, bonds, what do you like?
Maneuvering your own funds, that's very nice. Well, that's great, and so that way you keep nice touch with your old friends too. Yeah. Anything else? Any funny instances looking back, say over your Marine career? Any humorous times that you can remember that you want people to know about?
Well, I can remember some funny things. One happened on a trip from Cherry Point to Barronfield, Alabama. I had an old Chevrolet that I kept there at the parking lot outside of Cherry Point, North Carolina, and we would get in that and run down to the beach on a good evening, get a watermelon, and do a little. Well, anyway, let me go on to the really funny thing that happened. When we were transferred for maneuvers to Barronfield, I got permission from the squadron officers to drive my car down there, so I could have my car to chase those pretty girls in Alabama. And
those Southern Bells.
The guy in my outfit that kept pestering me to go with me on the car, Lavelli. And Lavelli was kind of a wild guy on liberties, and I was reluctant to let him go, but finally he talked me into it, and so the 2 of us took off from Cherry Point, North Carolina to go to drive to Barronfield. Well, back in those days there were no interstates, and so it was slow going, but we were moving right along, and we were trying to get through Georgia, and it was raining and dark, and we were not making good time, and I had promised to be at Barronfield at a certain time, and I was pushing on. Well, the rain got so bad, I said, we gotta do something. About then, a driveway popped up, and I pulled off into a parking lot, and Lavelli looked over there, and by this time, he had already started working on his Coke and bourbon, and he was ready for a party, and he said, that looks like a nightclub. All these cars around here. He says, I bet that's a nightclub. I'll be back in a little bit. And he hops out of the car in the rain and runs over there. And I said, oh my gosh, don't tell him what's going to happen now. I wanted to drive on because we were late. And after a while, I was hoping he'd come back, but he didn't. So I said, well, I'm going to have to go in and drag Lavelli out of there and load him up in the car and get going again. Well, I opened the door to this nightclub. Sure enough, it was a nightclub. And everybody was singing the Marine Corps hymn. I said, what's this? I looked up on the stage. This is my buddy Lavelli. He's up there leading the audience and singing the Marine Corps. He's had on his Marine Corps uniform. And we were only about 5 miles from a big army base there in Georgia.
Oh my gosh.
It's a good thing that all these guys were feeling good, because it would have been a real disaster if it turned nasty.
That could have turned nasty very easily, I should say. Yeah, the inter-service rivalry, you might say, was pretty intense.
It could have popped up. Yeah.
Pretty intense. You mentioned playing golf when you were in high school. And do you still play golf?
Yeah, although I'm reduced to playing with one hand. I got a steel bar in my left wrist.
Oh, that's where you broke your wrist, huh?
Yeah, in 1947 at Quantico, when I was playing baseball for the Marine Corps Aviation Training School team.
Oh.
I fell and broke my wrist and had the cast on, and that was my first experience playing one-handed. There was a golf course there in Quantico, and they wouldn't let me do very much with this cast. They wouldn't let me go back to my class. So I had a lot of time for golf, so I played a lot of golf one-handed for the 6 weeks that I was wearing that cast. And the wrist healed up pretty good, and I played on the golf team in high school. Although by the time I had a 3-year hitch and got on to Memphis State, I tried for the golf team, but I didn't have the skills to be on the college golf team. But later on, the wrist got arthritis really bad.
Oh.
And that's how I had to get. It got so bad I couldn't pick up anything or even open a door with the wrist.
Oh my
The
gosh.
doctor said, "Well, the best thing we can do for you is to fuse it." And I said, "Fuse it? I won't be able to play golf." They said, "Sure you will." And I knew I could with one-handed, but I wasn't thinking about that at the time.
Right.
I went to got a second opinion here in Cincinnati, and before I really decided whether or not to have that steel bar put in there to fuse it, my daughter had a serious problem and got an okay from her health HMO to go to Mayo Clinic up in Minneapolis.
Yeah, Minnesota.
Anyway, we went to the Mayo Clinic. Took my daughter up there, and she had an appointment to get another opinion about a problem she had with her spine, and which had been a serious problem and affected the muscles in one leg. And she wanted another opinion, and so we took her to Mayo, and I said, "Well, while I'm over here at Mayo, I'll just ask them about my wrist." So I got the Mayo opinion about my wrist. They said, "Best thing we can do for you is to fuse it."
Oh.
So with all those 3 opinions, I unfused it, and now I can open the door with it.
Well, that's.
But I can't do anything with it with a golf club.
Oh, that's too bad.
That's
Yeah.
not true. When I putt, I put both hands on it because you don't have to move your left wrist.
Sure. Do you have any pain?
No,
No. Well, that's good. That's good.
got rid of the pain.
That's good. Well, I'll tell you, you had some tremendous experiences, and I know that your family and your friends that see this DVD are just going to have a lot of laughs too, because they're going to enjoy, and your winning personality and smile. It comes to mind that you want to tell? We got a couple of minutes left.
One of the maneuvers, Squadron was flown to a little field in the middle of Puerto Rico, and we slept in tents for 6 weeks, I guess it was, not too far from Ponce, Puerto Rico. I never did get into Ponce, some of the guys did, but one of the funny things that happened there was that this happened to be a kind of a desert area, and one of my buddies in the tent, when he put his boot on one morning, he got his foot out of there in a hurry and his eyes looked big, and he turned the boot up, shook out a scorpion.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh wow. Oh my golly, that's...
That was another little funny thing there. In Guantanamo Bay, we were in and out of Guantanamo while I was on the South End several times. And there was a NCO club at Quantico where you could buy beer. And they said, "Well, now this Cuban beer is a little different from American beer. You better watch out." That the name of it was Hatui. It had a picture of an Indian on the label. And they said, if you start drinking this beer, and if that Indian starts winking at you, you better cut back because it's beer. And I was rather inexperienced with the beer, and the Indian started winking at me before I finished the first bottle.
Oh my gosh. Well, that is funny, and that so many servicemen during the war and after the war got into the service and were exposed to things that they'd never been exposed to before. We've all had that kind of experience. Well, listen, honestly, you've just been a wonderful interviewee, Hurley. And of course, number one, we want to thank you for your great service to your country, and you gave of yourself very unstintingly and unselfishly, and the whole nation certainly approves of that and appreciates it. You know, it's a little different today from what it used to be 50 years ago, the attitude in our country. And we have to do the best we can to preserve what went before these days that we see today and the generations in between, because there have been a lot of changes, haven't there?
Sure have been.
Sure have been. Well, we thank you again. Hurley Chancey of Green Hills, Ohio. By God, God bless you. And it's been an honor and a privilege.
My pleasure also. I feel somewhat guilty, I guess is the right word, for being so lucky to be a what you call a World War II veteran without ever getting shot at. While I was in BNF 222, it never received any enemy fire whatsoever.
Yeah, well, I understand.
We were really lucky, I mean.
Yeah. But
I think our pilots, even though they had a little trouble learning how to get their plane back aboard that carrier, I think they were quite capable of serving
absolutely.
and doing their job.
And you were ready and capable, and you were a good, strong backup if needed. Well, thank you again, and that brings us to the close, and I hope your family enjoys seeing you on the interview.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay.